My name is Rivki Carfunkel, and I just want to welcome everybody. This is Goldie Carfunkel, and welcome to another class presented by the Forest Jewish Center. If I could please ask everyone to mute themselves.
You want me to mute everybody? Do you want?
Can you?
Looks like I have the controls here. I can mute everybody.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Where is Nasia?
Okay.
Where's Nasia?
So, I thought I could. Yeah. No, maybe not. Hold on.
Ruthie, where is Nasia?
Good question.
I don't know.
I don't know. I guess I can't.
You can't?
It doesn't say mute all here.
Okay.
It says mute me.
Oh, yeah. What happened?
Fran, are you able to?
I guess everybody's going to have to mute themselves. If everybody knows where that little button is on the side there, you just click on it and it turns from green to red.
Yeah.
We're not on mute screen. Okay, we're going to wait a couple more minutes for everyone to mute themselves so that we can get started. Fran, I love your glasses.
You do?
I do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fran, do you know how to mute yourself?
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Are you able to mute yourself, to mute your computer?
Yes.
Can you please do that? I would love to hear from you and love to schmooze with you, but we're going to get started. So we're just asking everyone to mute themselves.
Right. I'm Fran Parnas. I was Fran Gerstein, and I went to school with Ruthie. Ruthie and I were classmates.
So nice. Nice to meet you, Fran. Fran,
Nice
are you able
to meet you as
are you
well?
able to, are you able to mute yourself?
Pardon me?
Can you please press the mute button?
I'm sorry.
The mute button.
The new. I don't understand.
No, that's what I'm trying to do. Mute.
If you click on participants,
I did
Devorah,
that. Yeah.
it should say it on the right. It should say mute all.
I know. I do this all the time, but it just says
I don't know
invite
that.
or mute me.
I'm trying to do it on my end here.
Yeah, maybe you
Whoever
can
is
do it.
recording should be able to do it.
Yeah, is that Shimona?
No, I'm trying to do it, but I'm having a.
As long as you're in charge, you should be able to do it. The only thing I have is mute me, and I don't think you want me to do that.
No, definitely not.
I mean, if you read lips, we could try that, but no, we don't want to do that. Okay.
Ruthie.
All right. In the meantime, while they're working on that, so we'll start again. I'm Rivki Carfunkel. My husband's the rabbi at the Forest Jewish Center. I want to welcome you all. We have a very special treat tonight. Before we get started, I just want to thank Shimona Petrov, who is here with her husband, David. Shimona has taken tremendous initiative at the Forest Hill Jewish Center, organizing all sorts of learning, primarily women's learning, but learning of all sorts. And we welcome everybody. And thank you so much for joining us. So tonight, we are privileged to, now you're going to not see me for a moment, but you'll still hear me. Sorry. We are so excited to have Devorah Vale with us. So tonight is also being sponsored by Nesia and David Jacob and family. And it's their honor to sponsor one of Devorah Vale's incredible lectures leading up to the holiday of Shavuos in honor of their mother and grandmother, Mrs. Ruth Goldberg, who is a pillar of kindness and strength for her family, friends, and community.
That's Ruthie.
Now, Devorah Vale is an amazing speaker and teacher and spiritual life coach. And she has been involved in leading many community schools in Toronto and Canada and the United States. And she speaks all over. And now with COVID, she's been speaking all over Zoom. And I'm also very honored to consider Devorah a friend of mine, somebody that I admire and respect tremendously and look up to and learn from. So it's a real pleasure and honor. And I'm just going to ask one more time if you can hear me, if you can mute yourselves. So Fran and Louis, do you know how to press the mute button on your computer screen?
My wife does.
Just
It's in the corner of your screen. It's a little green thing that says mute. And if you just click on it, it will.
Yes.
Okay.
Would you like to just mute it?
Yes, please. Great. Okay.
Excellent.
I think we're ready to go then.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Rifki, for that very nice introduction. And hi, everybody. It's so nice to meet you all. I'm Devorah Vale. And I just want to tell you how thrilled I am to speak for the shul, for the Forest Hill Jewish Center, because it has a very special place in my heart. My parents, Mr. Daniel and Edie Monson, belong to the shul, for those of you who might have met them or known them. And my brother was actually the first president of the shul. It's a very funny story, but I asked him about it, and he said, well, way back when the shul was just beginning and they were above the Starbucks coffee shop, one day after shul, Rabbi Eli told him, go up there and make the announcements. And he said, well, why should I make the announcements? And he said, well, because you're the president now. So that's how he became the president. And anyway, the whole Monson family has a very special place in our hearts for Rabbi Eli and Rifki. Rabbi Eli actually made my parents life members near the end of their life, and they were so thrilled. And that was really such a kindness that he did. So tonight we're talking about walking in the footsteps of Ruth, and we're getting ready for the holiday of Shavuos. Now I have a confession to make, but when I was a kid, I don't think I even knew there was such a holiday called Shavuot. I mean, Pesach I knew, Hanukkah I knew, even Sukkot I knew about, but Shavuos was just kind of this invisible holiday that, you know, there's not really any mitzvot that you're supposed to do on Shavuos. And Pesach, of course, there's so much preparation. Everybody's getting ready. Mom's cleaning the house. No chametz allowed. You know, it's chaotic. And Sukkot, for anybody who built a sukkah, that was a lot of work too. You had to go to Home Depot, you know, first time a Jew is in Home Depot, that's a big deal. And you got to put up this little hut behind your house. Sukkot I knew about because we had a nice big sukkah at our shul. And we even had some stale sponge cake there that probably came all the way from Toronto to St. Catharines, where I grew up. Yeah. But Shavuos, I don't know, non-holiday. So I was thinking about it and I was wondering, you know, all those other holidays have so much preparation, and I guess Shavuos doesn't really have any. But the truth is when you think about it, in some ways, Shavuot has more preparation involved than Pesach and Sukkot put together, because God gives us 49 days to prepare ourselves between Pesach and Shavuot. And what are we supposed to be doing during those days? Well, on the one hand, we're counting the days until the time when we're going to get the Torah. And on the other hand, together with that, what we're supposed to be doing is working to refine our character traits, is to make ourselves into a vessel, into the type of person that is able to receive this incredible gift, this Torah that Hashem wants to give us. So I think the reason that we don't think of Shavuos as preparing in the conventional way is because Shavuos involves internal preparation, 49 days worth of trying to figure out where I can improve, what I need to do better, what habits I need to try and get rid of, and how I can make myself into somebody worthy of being Mekabel the Torah, of being able to receive the Torah. So I want to talk about 3 questions that I have regarding the Magilla, Megillat Ruth, which is the story of Ruth that we read on Shavuot. So the first question is, why do we read this Megillah? Why on Shavuot? The second question is, what was so special about Ruth? Why is Ruth somebody who somehow was able to become the grandmother of King David and part of the lineage of Mashiach himself? Because we know that the Mashiach is going to come through the line of King David, and Ruth was his great-grandmother. So what did she do that made her be able to fill this role, this very important role? And the third question is, what can we learn from Ruth practically? What can we take away? What's the takeaway from this class? How can we learn from her ways and continue to ready ourselves for Shavuot? Okay, so the first question is, why do we read this Megillah? So there's a lot of reasons, but I'm just going to tell you quickly about 3 of them. One very practical reason is that the Magilla, the story of Ruth, takes place during this time of year, between the time of the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, which is basically these 49 days that we're counting. Another name for Shavuot is actually Chag HaKatzir, the holiday of the harvest. So Ruth enters the story during the barley season, and the story ends in the wheat season, a few years later. Okay. Another reason that we read Megillat Ruth, which is even more obvious, is because Ruth was considered a convert par excellence. She was the poster child for converts. And on Shavuot, we are all, in a sense, converts. Every time Shavuot rolls around, it's as if God is offering us the Torah anew. And we are in a position to say, yes, I want it, again and again and again, every year. I want to be part of the Jewish people. I want to live by your Torah, which is what Ruth did so long ago. So we're like Ruth. We are all converts. Now, the name Ruth, very interestingly, if you're into gematria, numerology, every letter of the Hebrew alphabet has a numerical value. And it's fascinating that the words of the letters of the word of root, Resh, Vav, Taf, equals 606. The Resh is 200, the Vav is 6, and the Taf is 400. So what does this mean? Who cares? The idea is that all of the non-Jews at that time already had 7 mitzvahs. They're called the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, of the children of Noah, that were given to the whole world at that time. So what Ruth did is she added to her 7 mitzvahs 606, so that now she has 613, and she's part of the Jewish people. So the third reason that we read this Megillah is simply to show King David's lineage. King David was born and died on the holiday of Shavuot, or on the day of Shavuot. It wasn't yet Shavuot. I mean, Shavuot was way back before King David. But he was born and died on that day. And so the Megillah shows us his lineage, that he is the great grandson of this woman, Ruth. Okay, second question. Our second question is, what was so great about Ruth? Why do we read this Megillah? So the rabbis asked the same question, and they even asked the question, why was it even written down? Why do we need this story? How did it become part of the Tanakh? How did it become part of the holy writings? And they basically say this. They say the book of Ruth contains no laws regarding purity and impurity. There's no laws about what's permitted and what's forbidden. So why was it written down? And the rabbis conclude that the reason that this book was written down is in order to teach the reward of those who do deeds of kindness, what we call chesed. That Ruth in the story personified, she was the epitome of somebody who actualized this midah, this character trait of chesed. And for that alone, this book was worthy to be written down by Shmuel Hanavi, by the way, by Samuel the prophet. So what is chesed? That's what I want to talk about tonight with you. And why is it so crucial for each one of us to develop this character trait of chesed in order to be able to receive the Torah? So King David writes in Tehillim, in Psalms, Olam chesed yibane. When Hashem created the world, he created it on the foundation of chesed, of loving kindness. The world was built on chesed. Sorry, Bibi, do you mind muting yourself? Terry, I think you're not muted, honey. Okay, sorry. What does this mean that God built the world on chesed? It means that God himself is constantly involved in sending blessing into his world. For those of you who know Pirkei Avos, right? The ethics of our fathers. In chapter 1, Mishnah 2, it says, Al Shlosha Devarim Ha'olam Omeid, that the world stands on three things: Torah, Avoda, and Gemilut Chasadim. Torah study, prayer, and acts of loving kindness. In other words, the world stands on this tripod. And if you take one of those legs away, the entire world would collapse. That's how important acts of loving kindness, chesed, are. When you read the Megillah, you see over and over again this theme of chesed. Ruth's chesed for her mother-in-law, Naomi, who's lost her husband and her two sons and is impoverished. And Ruth joins her and comes back with her and takes care of her and insists on gleaning in the fields so that her mother-in-law doesn't have to. The chesed between Ruth and Boaz, and chesed that goes back and forth throughout the Megillah. Now, what is chesed? Chesed is being outward oriented. It's seeing the other person. It's walking in their shoes. In Hebrew, we call it being nosei be'ol, carrying another person's burden. It's the person who's always asking, what can I do for you? How can I be of service to you? What do you need that you might not even know that you need? It's becoming an expert at being able to really see the other person. It's not about putting yourself last or being a shmata, but it's about putting your ego in its right place so that you can lose your ego in service of the other. It's like that line out of a Joni Mitchell song, I love you when I forget about me. Interesting that in Hebrew, the word ahava, love, and the word echad, one, again, are equal to each other. They both share the number 13, because we know that the more you feel love for another person through giving, the more oneness you feel with that other. So the truth is according to the Torah and according to Judaism, we are all here in this world to be there for other people, to practice acts of kindness so that they change us into a kind person. And I want to tell you a few stories about people who are experts at this. So there was a great Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Gifter, who actually died in 2001. He was the head rabbi of a yeshiva in Cleveland called Telz Yeshiva. And one day he was traveling on a plane from LaGuardia to Cleveland with his Rebbitzin, and a young yeshiva boy who was part of the yeshiva was also trying to get on the plane. He didn't have a ticket. He was on standby. And thank God he ended up being able to get on the plane. Anyway, on the plane ride to Cleveland, all of a sudden the stewardess comes over to this young boy, this young man, and he says, here's your kosher meal. She says, here's your kosher meal. So he says, oh, no, there must be a mistake. You see, I didn't order a kosher meal. Remember those days, ladies and gentlemen, when we used to get meals on the plane, right? Well, kosher meals even. Okay, anyway, so he said, no, that can't be my meal. I went standby and I didn't order any meal. And the stewardess calmed him down and said, no, the rabbi who's sitting a few seats in front of you, he told us to give you his meal. Well, the boy was shocked and he said, absolutely not. I'm not taking the Rosh Yeshiva's meal. And he got up and he took the meal and he was giving it back to Rav Gifter. And Rabbi Gifter said to him, listen, you see my Rebbitzin over here? I know that when I get home, if I'm hungry, if I'm starving, she's going to, take care of me. She's going to take care of me and I won't be hungry. But when you get back to the yeshiva, the kitchen's going to be closed and you may be hungry. So please take my meal. So here's an example of someone, a great person, a great Jew, who's sitting on the plane thinking about an opportunity that he has to be able to do a chesed for somebody else. Let me tell you another story about a man named Mr. Ronnie Greenwald. He just died recently. Now, Mr. Ronnie Greenwald was known as the Jewish James Bond. He was a community activist, an international spy, a political mediator, a mentor for troubled teens, and the beloved camp director of a camp both my daughters went to called Camp Sternberg, okay? And a very dedicated Jew. So one day, there's a woman named Esther. Esther's just become engaged to a boy from Lakewood, New Jersey. And it's her very first time joining him in Lakewood for Shabbos. She's never navigated the bus station before, but she goes down to the bus station on Friday to buy a ticket to Lakewood. And she's a little bit overwhelmed because she sees that the lineup is very, very long to buy the tickets. And she realizes that her bus is probably going to leave before she actually gets a ticket. All of a sudden, while she's standing in the line thinking about this Mr. Ronnie Greenwald comes over to her and says, "Hi, you going to Lakewood?" And she says, "Yes." And he says, "Here's a ticket." Anyway, she's completely confused and she says, "Why do you have an extra ticket? I mean, is it an extra ticket?" He says, "Yeah, it's extra." She says, "Well, why do you have this?" He says, "Well, I always buy an extra ticket when I come here on Fridays, because I visit my grandchildren a lot in Lakewood. And I remember how nervous I got once at the first time that I went, worrying that the line was going to make me miss the bus. So I always buy an extra ticket for somebody who might be in that situation." So she said, Esther says to him, "How much do I owe you?" And he says, "You don't owe me anything. It's my pleasure." So here's a man that anticipates an opportunity to do chesed. These are people who master it. Let me tell you another story, a true story that happened during COVID, during the pandemic, right? It happened in Lakewood again, Pesach time. Poor Mrs. Schwartz was going to be all alone for the Seder. Her husband had died a few years back, and her children were not able to come because of all of the restrictions of travel, quarantine, etc. So her next door neighbor, the Finkelstein, said to her, "You know what, Mrs. Schwartz, we have an idea. Why don't you push your table close to the window of your house? We're going to move our dining room table as close as we can to our window that's next to your house, and we'll have the Seder together. You won't be alone." Anyway, she was very, happy about that. She wouldn't be alone. And sure enough, they moved the tables together and she felt almost like she was with a family. After Pesach was over, she called her kids and her kids said, "How was the Seder? How did it go?" And she said, "Oh, you're not going to believe this." She said, "The Finkelsteins sing all the same tunes that Daddy used to sing. All the same tunes that we sing as a family. The Finkelsteins have so many of our minhagim. They have so many of the same customs that we have." It was incredible. It was almost like you were with me. Anyway, what Mrs. Schwartz didn't know is that the Finkelsteins had called her children before Yontiv to ask them, "What are the tunes that your family sings? What are some of the customs? Do you steal the Afikomen? Do you hide the Afikomen? What do you do at your place?" And this is what you call doing chesed with a ribbon on top, right? They went beyond the call of duty. It's enough that they invited her, but no, they made sure that she would feel over the top at home at this Pesach Seder. Okay, so these are not random acts of kindness, as it says out there in the world. These are called purposeful acts of kindness. And these are the kind of kindnesses that Jews engage in. So the Rambam asks a question. The question he asks is it better to give $100 to a needy person or $1 to 100 people? Maybe you're familiar with this question. Now, if you had $1,000 and you could give it to one needy person, or you could take $1 and give it to 1,000 people, where do you think your money would have more power? I know what you're going to say because I've asked this question before, and most of us would say it makes more sense to give $1,000 to one person. But let's say everything being equal, that it's not going to make a huge difference, even that $1,000. The Rambam says it's better to give $1 to 1,000 people, because the point of tzedakah and the point of all the mitzvot, including chesed, is that they are supposed to change you. You can give the $1,000 one time, or you can give the dollar 1,000 times. And that makes you not just somebody who gives charity, but somebody who becomes a charitable person. Somebody becomes a person of chesed, a person of giving, right? Just like in the gym, when we flex a muscle over and over again, it gets stronger. You can actually see it. So too, when we do the mitzvah of kindness over and over again, it changes us. We become different. It's interesting that in the English language, even though I looked this up and I couldn't find this anywhere, but maybe I made it up. In the English language, when we want to say somebody's cruel, when we want to say somebody's without any compassion, what do we call them? We call them ruthless. Ruthless. They're ruthless. They're lacking Ruth. They're lacking in Ruth. And there's even a word, believe it or not, which I've never heard anybody use, called ruthful. That, we want to be the opposite of ruthless. We want to be ruthful. And they can't figure out what the word Ruth is coming from. They say it's from the German, which means mercy. But I know it definitely came from the Magilla and the personality of Ruth, okay? Now, who does Ruth remind us of in the Torah? Who does Ruth remind us of in the Tanakh? I'll give you a hint. Listen to this. This is something that Boaz, who's another main character in the story, says to Ruth when he meets her. He says, I have been fully informed of all that you have done for your mother-in-law, how you left your father and mother and the land of your birth, and you went to a people you had never known before. Now, for those of you who know about Abraham in the Torah, God tells Abraham, you have to leave your land, you have to leave your birthplace, and you have to leave your father's home and go to a land that I will show you. And the rabbis compare Ruth to Abraham, which makes sense because Abraham, the first Jew or the first Hebrew, if you like, was really the first convert. Right? He was a convert too. He didn't have Jewish parents. He didn't have parents who believed in one God. His parents were idol worshipers. So the rabbis compare Ruth to Abraham, and guess what they say? They say that Ruth was even greater than Abraham. How so? Well, God told Abraham to leave, to get up and get out. Now, if God himself is speaking to you and telling you to do something, which, by the way, he is every Shavuos. He's saying, keep my Torah, I gave it to you, right? But if God himself is telling you, get up and go, you're going to get up and go. In Ruth's case, nobody told her to get up and go. That call came from within. That internal desire to join the Jewish people came from within. She left behind her wealth. She was a Moabite princess. She was from the aristocracy. She left behind her high level of prestige in order to join Naomi in the land of Israel with a people that despised her people, the Moabites, and with her mother-in-law who was impoverished and had nothing to offer her. Naomi says to her, why are you coming with me? Do I have any more sons that you could marry? Is there anything that I can give you? Not only that, but Naomi persuades her, pushes her to go back 3 times. And Ruth persists and says, I am coming. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, that's where I will live. Your people are my people, and your God is my God. Now, what do we learn from Ruth and about Chesed that this teaches us? Ruth understands that to be reborn, to remake oneself, one has to heed an internal call, to move away from the familiar, to get out of your comfort zone. And that sacrifices, we don't like that word today, sacrifices. That's a bad word in our society. But that sacrifices are made and need to be made often for that person who pursues chesed, for that person who wants to live a life of Torah's chesed. I'll tell you another story by Rabbi Pesach Krohn. He tells a story about a bunch of boys at summer camp. There's a camp in the Catskills called Camp Romemu, and there's about 400 boys that go there. And in the summertime, when the Shabbases are very, very long, it's very hard to keep 400 boys entertained, let's say. At these Jewish camps, these Orthodox Jewish camps, there's no boating, there's no swimming sports, there's no basketball even. So how do you keep 400 rowdy boys involved? So the camp director came up with a raffle, and he said, anybody who learns extra Mishnayot is going to get raffle tickets. And you can use these raffle tickets to put into the grand raffle, and the prize winner gets extra waterfront activities, extra water skiing, and the second prize winner gets a watch. So there were about 10 boys there that summer from Antwerp. And one of the boys really, really, really wanted to win this raffle. And he was learning and learning and learning and getting tickets and tickets, but so was everybody else. And he kept saying, I'm going to win, I'm going to win, I'm going to win. And he'd walk around all the time saying, I'm going to win the raffle. Anyway, the day of the raffle came, they picked out the ticket, and believe it or not, he was the winner. And he was kind of shocked, but he was like, see, I told you I'm going to win. Well, what he didn't know is that all the kids at his bunk, and even all the kids in the unit, had gotten together and decided that they're going to write his name on their raffle tickets. They knew so much how much he wanted to win. Now, you don't have kids doing this who haven't been raised in an environment of chesed, in an environment where when you give up something, you're the winner. You're the strong one. Ezehu Gibor, right? Who is the strong one? The one who's able to overcome his own needs for the sake of the other. This is what chesed is. There was a famous rabbi, Rabbi Dessler, from England. He lived in England, but he was the mashgiach of the Panovich Yeshiva, which is like the Harvard of yeshivas in Israel. He was the spiritual mentor to the boys. He wrote a book called Strive for Truth. And in that book, in the first book, he asks a question. He says, is it love that leads to giving, or is it giving that leads to love? And he thinks about this in terms of the parent-child paradigm. He says, you know, from the time a child is born, the parent, whether they like it or not, is giving and giving and giving some more at 3 a.m, at 6 a.m, you know, when they don't feel like it, when they don't want to, giving and giving and giving. And he says, and it's interesting because the truth is, as much as a child can love a parent, you can't compare the parent's love for the child exponentially. And he says, and the reason that a parent loves a child so much is because they're constantly giving. So he concludes that it's not that you love someone and then you give to them, which is true too, but rather that when you give to somebody, you love them. And it's so interesting because when we give, what are we doing? We're expanding ourselves. When you give to somebody or something, what happens is you see yourself in that person now. You see yourself. You become part of that thing that you gave to. You, so to speak, go beyond the physical limitations of the body, because the body is the voice of taking. You know, this world is divided into givers and takers. And the soul is the voice of the giver. So When you expand yourself, when you go beyond that physical voice that says me, give, take, ego, put me first. Nice guys finish last, right? Don't be a shmata, okay? When you go beyond that voice and you see the other person and you give, you become part of that person. And now that stranger is not a stranger anymore. Now that stranger is someone who's part of you. I just made this up today. My husband says, I don't know, I think you're making it up. But the word for cruel is the word achzar. And the word for stranger is zar, a stranger. And I was thinking, a stranger is somebody you haven't yet given to. So it's easy to be cruel. When you're standing at a bus stop and somebody asks you, which bus should I take? Or do you have directions? Can you give me directions to Yorkdale? So even just offering the help, giving the directions already made you closer to this person than when you were just standing there ignoring each other at the bus stop. Isn't it true? So instead of being cruel, achzar, when we give to a stranger, a zar, we become closer to them. Before Kabbalat HaTorah, before we receive the Torah tells us, if you look there in the psukim, in the words, it says, Vayichan sham keneged ahar, that the Jewish people camped opposite the mountain. And the rabbis asked the question, these are a lot of people. These were 3 million people. Why does it echad the singular, Vayichan? It should say Vayichanu, that they camped. And Rashi, the great commentator, teaches us, Ke'ish echad b'lev echad. The Jewish people were like one person with one heart. The prerequisite to being able to receive the Torah was unity, love, this compassion, this giving, this chesed for one another, which creates that kind of unity. The word ahava, love, by the way, in the middle of the word ahava, we have 2 letters, hav, which in Aramaic means give, which teaches us again that it's giving that leads to love, not the opposite. Okay, another idea. I know I'm giving you a lot of ideas, but I just want to tell you another story about how the Jewish people are known for their chesed. In the Gemara in Yevamos, it says about the Jewish people that we have 3 characteristics. We're Baishanim, Rachmanim, and Gomle Chasadim. We have a sense of modesty. We have a sense of compassion. We're compassionate. And we're doers of kindness. We can't help ourselves. We just want to make the world better. We just want to do tikkun olam. We want to fix things. We want to make this world a better place. We can't help ourselves. As a matter of fact, it says if a Jew says he's Jewish and he's missing this aspect, then you have to go look at his yichus. Maybe there's some pagam, some flaw in his yichus if he's not a doer of kindness. Listen to this story from Rabbi, I can't remember who I heard this from. So there's this Jamaican non-Jewish guy who lives in Flatbush. And he drives a big truck, and a lot of his customers and clients are Jews, Orthodox Jews. He sees them all the time. He's always on, on Avenue J, etc. Anyway, one day he's locked out of his truck and he can't get in. And he remembers these Jewish guys gave him a card. And they told him, but if you're ever locked out of your car, just call this number. So he takes out the card, and the card says on top, Chaverim, which means chaverim, which means friends, okay? Chaverim, he can't say cha, okay? My father used to say, if you can't say cha, you're not Jewish, you don't pass the Jewish test. I think there's a lot of Jews that can't say cha today. But anyway, the point is, he takes it out, he calls the number, and all of a sudden these 2 guys, they could have been wearing Superman capes, okay? They come out of nowhere. They have all these gadgets. They open up his truck in 2 seconds and they say, there you go. And he says, hey, how much do I owe you? And they say, no charge, no charge. Anyway, he pins down a rabbi one day. He says, I have to ask you a question. I had these guys unlock my car. They didn't charge anything. I see these Hatzalah trucks all over the place. They're always, these emergency vehicles going all over the place, rescuing people, bringing people to the hospital. Do those guys get paid? And the rabbi says, no, they don't get paid. He goes, my goodness, what's going on here? Now, he didn't know anything about our free loan societies, about the millions of, even in Toronto, if you go to the back of the link, you'll see all kinds of gemachim. What are gemachim? Another cha word, right? These are like places where, like, for example, in Israel, when I needed a crib for a newborn baby, I could go to somebody's house who had 20 cribs in their already crowded little apartment that they just give out for free, and you bring it back when you're finished with it. You could even find a gemach for chickpeas, okay? If you didn't have time to make them before you're having a shalom zachar, you could find somebody who's got, piles of chickpeas just waiting for you. You just have to know the address. So he didn't even know about these things, but this Jamaican guy says to this rabbi, I don't understand. If God has you guys in this world, what does he need anybody else for? Cute, huh? Okay, I hope I'm not taking too much time. So God himself models chesed for us. The Torah begins and ends with an act of chesed. The first act of chesed that God does is he clothes Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve. After they've sinned and they realize they're naked, God clothes them. The last chesed that God does in the Torah is he buries Moshe, right? To this day, we don't know where Moshe is buried. Who buried him? God himself. Nobody else was there. We're told, the rabbis teach us, it's not Torah study, but practice that is the main thing. Or what we used to say around our Shabbos table, my sister Rebecca, she's still on, we used to have to recite all these verses. And I don't think I even knew what they meant when I was 7 and 6. They were just big words. But it started like this: be wise, not only in words, but in deeds. Mere knowledge is not the goal, but action. Okay, so that's why we have two sides of the tablets. We have two sides of the luchot that Moshe brought down. One side are the mitzvahs between man and God, and the other side are the mitzvahs between man and his fellow man. And God is basically telling us both sides are equal. Both sides, in order to be a balanced Jew, in order to be a properly actualized Jew, you have to be working on both sides. And we all favor one side over the other naturally, right? There's people who, I love mankind, it's people I hate. I'm just going to hang out with God as much as I can. And then you have the other type, right? People who are humanists and wonderful and giving and great, but they don't need God so much. I'm good enough without him. I'm doing okay. So to be a proper balanced Jew, we have to work on those parts of us that aren't developed, where we're a little bit weaker. Now, there's a terrible saying out there. And, the first time I heard it, I could say to my sister again, I think I went to see Wicked, that show Wicked. And anybody who was with me, probably would have not enjoyed me because they sang this song, "No good deed goes unpunished." Everybody's heard that line, right? No good deed goes unpunished. When I heard that line, I said, that is so not Jewish. That is such a not Jewish attitude. What does that even mean? Anyway, I looked it up on Wikipedia. You got to hear this. It's terrible. No good deed goes unpunished is a sardonic commentary on the frequency with which acts of kindness backfire on those who offer them. In other words, those who help others are doomed to suffer as a result of their being helpful. Okay, another one. Due to the cruelty, ignorance, or selfishness of the world or others, one's good deeds or good intentions will often result in more trouble than they're worth. Anyway, it just gets worse and worse. The point is this is not a Jewish idea. We don't do good deeds because we want accolades, because we expect people to do them back for us. We do them because they make us into a happier, better person, and because God wants us to be like him. God is the ultimate giver, and God wants us to be like him. And every good deed we do is noticed by God, and every good deed we do comes back to us. And I want to tell you a couple more stories about that before we end. The idea that chesed, the kindness that you do, is never, ever lost. let me tell you an incredible story. Not only that, it can even save your life. So it was the Intifada in Israel, and this IDF soldier named Gadi had just been shot by an Arab, and he was left to die outside of Ramallah. He was bleeding, and the Arab took him for dead. Meanwhile, this young man, Shlomo, was driving by, and he sees Gadi by the side of the road. He picks him up, he throws him in his car, and he races to the hospital to be able to save his life. They get to the hospital, the doctors, it's touch and go, but it turns out in the end, they can save him. And when Gadi sees that, things are okay, he leaves. A few minutes later, Shlomo leaves. A few minutes later, Gadi's parents arrive at the hospital. And within a couple of days, they're able to take him home to his home in Ashdod. Now, the mother really wanted to find the boy who saved her son's life. She made phone calls. She hung up signs everywhere in Ashdod and outside of Ashdod. And she owned the local grocery store in Ashdod, where she also put up signs trying to find this boy who saved her son's life. Wow. Meanwhile, a year later, Shlomo, the boy who picked him up on the side of the road, Shlomo's mom was visiting Ashdod. She was visiting friends there, and she saw a poster in this store, and she realized it was her son. It was describing her son. She goes up to the cash register where Gadi's mother is handling the cash. She owns the store, and she stares at her, and she says, "Do you remember me?" And Mrs. Ramon, Gadi's mother, looks at her and says, "No, I'm sorry, I don't remember you." And this woman, Shlomo's mother, explains, she says, 22 years ago, we were living in Ashdod. I had 2 kids then. And I came into your store one day and I was visibly upset. You see, I had just found out I was pregnant and we were in terrible financial trouble. And I had just realized that there was no way I was going to have this baby. And I had spoken to my doctor and I had made an appointment for an abortion. And you overheard my conversation. You saw how troubled I was. And not just you, but you and your husband came over and sat down with me. And you didn't push, and you weren't heavy-handed, but you listened to my dilemma. You offered me sound financial advice and guidance. And because of you, I decided not to have that abortion. And then she went on to say, and that son that I had is the one who saved your son's life. And the 2 mothers hugged each other. She said to her, "Mrs. Ramon, you saved my son, and in return, my son saved yours." In Hebrew, the word "and they gave," v'natanu, is a palindrome. Whether you read it forwards or backwards, it's the same word. Because when we give, we always get back. We never lose. Okay, I want to end with one more idea. The Talmud asks the question, what is greater, chesed or tzedakah? Is it greater to do deeds of loving kindness or, give tzedakah, what we think as, generally give money? And the Talmud concludes that chesed, doing acts of loving kindness, is greater than giving tzedakah. And it says this for 3 reasons. First of all, it says, you can do chesed for the rich or for the poor. Rich people also need you to visit them when they're sick. Rich people appreciate a shiva call. Rich people are happy when you dance at their weddings and make them happy. You don't need money for that. Okay? Second reason, chesed can be done with money, it's true, but it can also be done with the body. You don't need money to do chesed. Now, the truth is when somebody knocks at our door and asks for some money, you know, all of the rabbis write about the idea that it doesn't matter how much you give. What really matters to the poor person, to the person who's found himself at your door knocking, is to lend an ear, to listen to his troubles, to say, gee whiz, that's terrible, to invite him in and give him a drink of water or some orange juice, to let him sit down. I was a bus bias by somebody's house. I used to watch how this man in Toronto would bring the poor people in and sit them at his dining room table like they were kings and offer them drinks while he's writing them out a check, one after the other after the other. Again, it wasn't the amount. It was doing it over and over again. It was doing it with your body, giving that ear. And finally, the last reason is that chesed can be done for the dead or for the living, right? We call burying the dead, another way that we call it is it's called a chesed shel emes. It's a true chesed. Why? Because a lot of times when we do things for other people, in the back of our mind, we're thinking, okay, you owe me one. I'm keeping tabs on this. I'm expecting back from this, you know? And if you don't, whoa. But a chesed shel emes means a dead person, he can't do anything for you. It's a true chesed. You're really doing it altruistically for the right reasons, not because you're expecting something in return, right? So let me tell you, and I'm going to end with this story, an incredible story. It just happened. We all know about the tragedy in Meron that happened on Lag BaOmer. 45 people died. 45 very special people died in one of the holiest places in Israel after singing Ani Ma'amin and Shema Yisrael and Hashem Hua Elokim. And listen to this story. One of the people who survived, who was there at the front, trampled, came to the Shiva of one of the people who died. His name was Elazar Yitzchak ben Reuven. His neshama should have an aliyah. And this man came to that Shiva and he said, I want you to know that I was lying on top of your son when he was dying. And your son's mouth was in my ear. And this is what I heard. I heard him saying Shema Yisrael. He knew that he was going to die. But you know what he said after he finished? He said to me in my ear, I just want you to know that I moichel you. I forgive you. I want you not to think that you killed me. In other words, his greatest worry was that this guy on top of him, if he should survive, will go through the rest of his life feeling guilty, feeling remorse, feeling that he had something to do with his death. And the last thing that this guy who's dying is worried about is that he shouldn't think that way. Now, what do we learn from this? Number one, everybody who died there was special, for sure. But we learned that a person who acts like this in his last moments, who worries about the other guy, is somebody who lived his life like that, who lived his life all the time thinking about other people and worrying about their feelings and worrying about not causing them any pain. Only such a person could do something like that. And what else do we learn from him? We learn to consider the feelings of others even when we're in a difficult situation. Rav Chaim Volozhiner said, a man was born for others, not to serve himself. I know it's getting late, but I have to tell you one more idea that I love. I heard this years and years ago, probably 30 years ago, and I never forgot it. And my husband got me the source. So in the Talmud, it says, in regards to the saying from a woman of valor, who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. It says that that line is talking about the generation of Rabbi Yehuda, who was the son of Rabbi Eli, who lived after the decrees of Hadrian, when the people were impoverished and oppressed. It was said about this Rabbi Yehuda that 6 of his students would cover themselves with one garment due to their poverty. And nevertheless, they would engage in Torah study. So the great Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir Yeshiva in Jerusalem not too many years ago, he asked the question, how can 6 people share one garment? And the answer that he gives, and I want you to imagine yourself sharing a blanket with 6 people, okay? The answer that he gives is, the only way 6 people can get under one garment is if every person is pushing the garment to be over the head of the one next to him. If every person is pushing that garment to be on the head of the other, then you can get 6 people under one garment, under one blanket. But if everybody's pulling it and saying, hey, come on, give it to me. Come on, you have too much. Put it over my head. Then there's no way. There's no way you can get 6 people under one garment. Only when everybody's saying, here, take it. It's for you. I want you to have it. That's the only way that it happens. So ladies and gentlemen, we've got only, I think, 5 days. What is it? 5 days left until Kabbalat HaTorah. 5 days where we can all try to be more Ruthful and do some chesed for others. There's so many opportunities, right? Call people who need a call, smile underneath your mask to practice for when we get to actually smile at people and they can see our face, right? Let somebody in line ahead of you, let a car go ahead of you. None of this goes unnoticed. None of this is ever lost. And as we get closer and closer to that wonderful day where we receive the Torah, we can develop ourselves and exercise those spiritual muscles of chesed, which always are rewarded. If not in this world, then in the next for sure. Thank you so much for listening.
Devorah, thank you so, so much. That was so beautiful and so inspiring. And I really have to say to everybody that Devorah and her entire family, her parents, they should rest in peace, were unbelievable people. And I feel privileged to have known them. And this is a family, Devorah and her brothers and sister. And everybody in this family is just complete. Everything that you were speaking about, you personify. So I think it's one thing to just, hear all of these amazing, inspiring words about Ruth and giving and all of that. But we really had the privilege to hear from somebody who comes from a family that personifies that kindness. So thank you, Devorah. And thank you, everyone. And I wish you all a wonderful Shabbos and a wonderful holiday of Shavuot. And I hope you'll join us again at our next Forest Hill Jewish Center learning. I don't know when it will be, but I'm sure Shimona will let us know. And until then, lots of everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. And I don't know if I said this, but this class was also sponsored by Sarah Brown in memory of her father, Yeshaya ben Simcha, and all the grandparents and uncles and aunts who perished during the Holocaust, which was around this time period. So may all their neshamas have an aliyah.